Hi, my name is Charlotte and I am a compulsive overeater, and it's pleasure and a privilege to be here today to share my experience of step 8. So I'm going to, first of all, what is step 8? Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And just to qualify before I start, I've been in OA since 2004. And I've been abstinent by God's grace one day at a time since the 3rd of November 2007. And this program has transformed my life. It is an absolute miracle, and I would not be here today without it. And I can say that for a fact. I would not. I've worked my program through using the Big Book and the OA literature. And I keep working it from the Big Book because it works. And if it's not broke, I'm not going to keep trying to fix it. I did that for the first 3 years of my time in OA, and I stayed in the food. And I'm not in the food today, and it's an absolute gift from God. However, it's not magic. I have to put in the work. And step 8 is a big part of that. And I was praying about this week. And I was like, this is a really big step. There's a lot in the Big Book, and I think to note that there are 7 steps before we get here. The steps are in the order for a reason, and I don't need to, in my compulsive overeating head, have to change them or reorder them or change the wording. So interestingly, step 6 and 7 on my defects of character, humility and willingness all come before step 8. There's only a paragraph for step 6 and a paragraph for step 7, and steps 8 and 9. So step 8, the instructions cover pages 76 to 83. So I'm just going to read a bit of that just to give it context, and then explain or share with you my experience, strength and hope on the step and how I worked it. And obviously I don't speak for OA as a whole, just my own experience of what helped me get well. And please look for similarities, not the differences, and take what you want and leave the rest. So, as I said, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. My list didn't come from my head. It came from what I wrote down in my step 4. I had an actual list to go from. I wrote names of all the people, institutions, and principles that I had resentments about, and I went through each one systematically, looking at whether I owed an amends for my part. And this step for me is about maturity, which I lacked when I came into recovery. In the food, I was eating for years, right from the age of 6 till I got abstinent at age 29, and my behaviors and my thinking were insane. That's why I needed step 2. And I couldn't have done this step without being abstinent, because I needed clarity of mind. And it says here on page 76, having just done step 6 and 7 and the step 7 prayer, we now need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list, step 4. And sexual inventory of all persons we've harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We've subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will, step 3, and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. I have that highlighted as the step 8 prayer. I had a lot of rage in recovery, a lot of rage, and it was very hard for me to keep my side of the street clean and look at my part. I was always a point the finger, you got 3 pointing back, but I couldn't get beyond what other people had done to me. And I'm going to stay sick and in the food if I'm not able to own my part. So I had to pray for the will to do this and ask my higher power till it came. To continue, remember it was agreed at the beginning, note the italics, we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol, food. Probably there are still some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we've hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured, to some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. At the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. And I highlighted this bit as well when working this step. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And just to note here that for me, in the food, my whole life was about me and escaping people, life situations. I was not a person of service. If I was, it was because I was trying to manipulate you to do something for me that would suit me. It was almost like working these steps transformed my thinking. My psychic change really has been a change in thought, outlook, and feeling. And I do service today because it helps me and it helps the other person and keeps me well and my stronger. But I had an awful lot of amends to make in my recovery. I really did. And I'm going to skip now because the next few pages are about our emotional amends, our financial amends, our domestic amends, and our living amends. It really looks in depthly at how my behavior, my mouth, my big mouth, affected other people in the things I said and did, the money I stole, my financial amends, I committed fraud. You know, I was always stealing out of people's pockets because of food to get my supply. I didn't think twice about it. Didn't matter what family member, what age group, or whether they were struggling or not. I just had to have my fix. And then it talks about living amends to the ongoing negative behaviors of my character in relation to other people. And it talks about domestic amends, so the people I lived with, my impact on them. Now, I just say that I could only see like what they had done. You know, I was always looking outward, not inward. Never wanted to take responsibility for myself. And there's a bit, I think it's on page 62, and I was outraged when I came into recovery and I read it. And it said something like selfishness, self-centeredness. That is the root of our problems, driven by 100 forms of fear. And that was me in the food. And on page 82 at the bottom paragraph, it says the alcoholic, the compulsive overeater, is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted, selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that abstinence, sobriety is enough. He is like the farmer who came up out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyse the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticise them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. It's noted in italics, if you haven't got the book. Unless one's family expresses the desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness, of compulsive overeating would make a skeptic out of anyone. And I think it's just, yeah, it's almost like Bill, when Bill wrote this book, he knew himself, he knew this illness and the cunning, baffling, powerful. Other people have defects. They may be glaring, but the bit here that our own actions are partly responsible. And that for me is what this step is all about, because it's not over and done with. I still have to make amends. I'm not perfect. I'm still working my program and I need my program a day at a time. And I need to continually clean house. But when I first worked this step, it was a real, I understand now why humility had to come in step 7. I get that now. I went back through the list. I couldn't do this step without a sponsor. I needed a sponsor, and for me, I needed to be abstinent. I needed clarity of mind, and I needed to work with a sponsor for objectivity. And I went back through my list and I wrote out a name, And I just thought I'd share with you the structure of how I did my step 8 and came to the place of being able to make a step 9. I wrote step 8 as if I was never going to make step 9, because I was so terrified of having to go to people face to face or write them a letter or be ready to make the amends if they ever came into my path, if I didn't know where they were. And indeed, is that 10? 5 minutes, okay. And be ready to if they weren't, if I didn't know where they were, but just be ready to make that amends as a maybe amends. And so I took this list to my sponsor, and there were names on there that didn't need to be. And I really needed, and I could see why sponsorship is so important in working the steps, because there were some amends on there. And she said, where have you, done intentional harm? Where have you actually done intentional harm in your behavior? And there were some amends that I just wanted the people to like me. I'm such a people pleaser. I just want people to like me. And I thought, if I say sorry to this particular family member for something that wasn't my fault and that wasn't an owed amends, maybe they'll actually want to talk to me. Maybe they'll want to be my friend, kind of like, so there's even cunning, baffling, powerful, this illness. It holds no prisoners. It gets in there. It's like the actor in step 3 when it talks about they can be gracious and, helpful and kind, or they can be mean, egotistical and self-serving. And so I wrote this list and we went through it. And, there was like scrap, scrap, scrap. Okay, here we go. I've got a block of names, and I had family, I had friends, I had institutions, I had banks. I shan't name them. I'm being recorded, but I have made my amends. And I wrote a name per page, and I thought, how am I going to do this? The big book, it spends 3 pages talking about financial amends. This is important stuff. I need to clear the wreckage here. And it talks about, there's a lot of domestic examples of infidelity or, child maintenance. It's very practical. And for me, I was like, what about me? What about me? What about amends to myself? I have abused myself, and I had abused myself. But for me, the amends comes from working the steps, because I end up not being so wretched anymore to other people and myself, by working this program of committing to a life of abstinence one day at a time. I am making amends to me, because I'm not selfish, dishonest, self-seeking. And when I am, I know, and when I am that, I've got fear prayer, I've got God to ask forgiveness, I've got step 10, I can process resentment, share it with somebody else. So I had this list, I put a name per page, and I was helpfully, my sponsor broke it down into 5 sections. So it was, okay, who do you owe the amends to? I wrote name, and then it was like, what type of amends do you owe? I was like, well, I don't know, what type of amends? And she said, well, let's look at the book, let's look at the instructions in the book. So for example, and this really helped me looking at the instructions, because it meant I wasn't going with my thinking, because that's where the problem is. Food goes down, substance, and then I've got thinking, which is the difference. This is why for me, OA and the 12 steps are different from a diet and a diet plan. Food goes down, diet used to come around, tried hundreds of diets, hundreds of weight loss, laxative pills, but no transformation of thinking. And for me, that's what these steps and this step did. It was transforming my thinking. So I was like, okay, she said, let's look at 4 types of different amends. We've got
Charlotte. You've got 2 minutes left.
Okay, so we've got the emotional amends. So it's the things I've said to people that have harmed them. It's my mouth again, going off on one. And that's on page 77. It says, it is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him. And I looked at whether I owed emotional amends. There were a lot of emotional amends. I'd been rude to people. I'd hurt people. I'd said unkind things intentionally. For me, it was hurt people, because I was hurting inside. And I think the beauty of an amends is I don't talk about myself. It's not about how I was feeling, giving a justification. I look at the evidence. So I looked at, always for me, I need to look at the evidence. What happened? What did I do? What did I say? What did I steal? Financial amend. What ongoing negative behavior? For example, my jealousy, very jealous in my binging. And my jealousy would lead to me ignoring people, to me stealing, to me being unkind. So the amends wasn't me saying, you know what, I've been jealous of you for years and I'm really sorry. It was actually, I'm sorry. Actually, I said, what? I've ignored you. I've been rude to you. And I said spiteful things and I'm sorry. And it was really clear for me what I needed to say when I looked at my behavior. And it was the same with when I was stealing money. It was the same with people I lived with and the things I needed to make amends for. You know, my bitter resentment that I justified for many years ended up in this deep-rooted sarcasm. I couldn't have a conversation with my mother without being sarcastic. You know, and even now in recovery, you know, this is like after nearly 15 years abstinent, when I go for Sunday lunch, by God's grace, I'm able to. It's taken 14 years to move near half an hour down the road. 14 years of abstinence to be able to move half an hour down the road. I go to the loo and I hand my will and my life over and I said, please keep my gob shut. You know, when I want to go up, that's rude. Or when I feel hurt, it's like, and it's not, and that's the last minute. Okay, so it's not about a step of being servile and scraping, but it is about accountability for me and responsibility to be able to own my part, own my wrongs, not try and change the other person. Just because I'm in recovery doesn't mean the family are. You know, it's not my business. You know, and I think somebody said it earlier about attraction, not promotion. You know, I need to be that one man with the big book in my hand, that one woman with the big book in my hand. So I have made amends in my initial step work. Some people still don't like me, and that's okay. Money where I can't pay it back because I can't see that person. Is that 1 minute as in finish now? Or
Yeah, if you could finish up.
oh, sorry, I didn't realize. Okay, cool. So yeah, it's a lot to say. I don't know if I've helped at all, but yeah, it's just a phenomenal step and it's brought much healing and it's led me to a higher power and a deep relationship. And that's the whole point. So I'm abstinent. Thank you.